name is James Young, and I'm the host of It's a New Day. I would like to wish the viewing audience a happy and prosperous new year. Today, we have a panel of guests that will basically take off from last week's show about the Crescent area. Please welcome to my immediate left, Mr. Victor Saunders of Pathway to Peace. Next, I would like to introduce the Chief of Police of the City of Rochester, Chief James Sheppard. And last but not least, Nelson Baldwin, the President of the Jefferson Avenue Business Association. Thank you all for coming on today's show. As I like to state, let's just jump right into this. I would like to preference this show at first glance. When you look at the Crescent area from charts and diagrams, you get statistics, but not a true understanding of the people. Because the data is so raw, we lump everyone in the Crescent area as people who deserve to be isolated. But when you take a look at the people and begin to see what makes them tick or not tick, you get a different perspective. For instance, let's begin with the level of violence in the Crescent area. This isn't just a random act of violence, but a pattern. This pattern of violence can be seen in any community which is poverty-stricken with unemployment, drugs, a sense of helplessness, no way out. Social scientists call this pattern the culture of honor. Cultures of honor take root in communities where young men who are unemployed, which promotes a sense of lack of self-worth. Because of a lack of self-esteem, these young men have no respect or regards for anyone else. So now these young men become callous, aggressive, not only through their words, but their deeds too. Because of a feeling of being less than, he projects that he isn't weak. He has to be willing to fight and, if need be, to kill if he feels threatened in any way. The culture of honor is at the center of his livelihood and self-worth. A young man venturing into a life of crime, the critical moment of his development, of his worth, will be determined by his first confrontation, his first argument, his first fight. This so-called culture of honor is no honor at all, nor is it an attempt to justify this behavior. It also must be understood that there are many more good people who live in the Crescent area than there are bad. So how do we fix this? How do we begin to make this right? Chief Sheppard, I know that the role of law enforcement is to enforce the law. In the Black community, there is a serious disconnect with law enforcement. How do we begin to connect the dots? How do we get people to see that the police are there to protect the community?
Well, I think one of the key pieces is that the role of law enforcement is not just to enforce the law. I think the Rochester Police Department or any police department in any urban area, part of their role is one, law enforcement, but it's also engagement in terms of engaging the community, recognizing the fact that in any neighborhood, the majority of the people, I like to say 99% of the people are the good people. They may be poor, they may be living in bad housing, but they're good people. And then that 1%, the ones who choose to be disruptive, the ones that want to be violent, they're the ones that tend to define what a neighborhood is looked at, in terms of violence or crime.
Mr. Saunders, please jump right in. Add something to this, please.
Well, as far as the perception that young men in the Crescent have as far as law enforcement goes, a lot of times goes to their previous interactions with law enforcement. A lot of times where we were younger, we were able to have positive interactions with law enforcement in the schools as well as in our community centers. And that has changed somewhat. And a lot of times because of the opportunities to have those type of interactions with law enforcement, it's unfortunate that their interactions generally are on a negative end. So therefore, it fosters a perception that it's a us against them mentality, which in fact we know it's not. The fact that a lot of the law enforcement officers in Rochester live in those neighborhoods, a lot of us older individuals know these people as ex-classmates, things of that nature. So it's something that is definitely we're going to have to work on as far as perception goes, involving our younger individuals in the city.
Mr. Baldwin, would you speak on this from an economic development point? How does this impact a community trying to do business? How does this impact, because you're up on Jefferson Avenue. Jefferson Avenue is one of the corridors that is a hot spot, or has been known as a hot spot for crime, and people being up there projecting a very negative image. How does this impact the business community up there?
Well, actually, it is a real downfall for the business community because we don't need a group of people hanging out on the streets in front of our businesses due to the fact that a lot of the recreation centers have been closed down. The kids don't have nowhere to go, and then they turn to this mentorship, street mentorship, I would say, that they would have to get into gangs and to be on several corners here and there to, in fact, stay alive. And then they get scared to go on certain corners because of this situation. But for a business point of view, the economic system, I think we need to engage with our police department so we can have surveillance, that we can know where these people are at all times.
Okay. Chief Sheppard, last week when we presented the data that Professor Clovis came and shared with us, one of the things that he mentioned is that in the process of extracting this bad element out of this community, it left a serious hole, if you will, in the community, because now we're seeing the devastating effect of black men being extracted out of this community, and in certain zip code areas in the Crescent area, there are no men between the ages of 17 to 35. Is this something that the police department has thought about? Are there ways that we can still enforce the law? Are there other alternatives besides just going to prison, which is now determining how the punishment fits the crime? Would you speak on that?
Well, I think that for a lot of Rochester's neighborhoods in which you have poverty, you are going to have a lot of young African-American males that are going to go to jail. And a lot of them, based on the fact that they have not invested in their education, they have not invested in having a positive lifestyle, that contributes to that enforcement being part of the solution. I will say this too, though, that I don't think that enforcement is the answer to any problem. You know, we're not going to arrest our way out of this problem, because we've, you know, in my lifetime, you know, I'm 55 years old, and, you know, we've tried to arrest our way out of these problems, and it's not the solution to the problems. You know, I talk a lot about police engagement and us investing in youth, because that's where it's really going to start, is investing in these young kids, letting them know that, one, there is a life ahead of just being in the ghetto. There is a life ahead in terms of trying to strive to be somebody, and the police have to play a role in that. You know, you talked about the culture of honor, and I'm going to say it's not a culture of honor, it's a culture of violence that we deal with in this city, and that people feel that by using violence, that's the way you deal with small, minor conflict, and that needs to change as well. I think a lot of our African-American men, and I'm talking the older ones now, they also have to invest in these neighborhoods, because these young men don't have a mentor, they don't have a role model, they don't have somebody who tells them that, you know what, if you have a disagreement, you can disagree and you can walk away, and that doesn't make you less of a man. But a lot of them need to understand that for us to be able to change this city.
I definitely agree with that, which leads me into the question I wanted to ask you, Mr. Saunders. Once again, from the charts that we looked at last week, 52% of the homicides here in Rochester are about disputes. You're dealing with these young men. I'm just at a loss. What are they arguing about? What kind of argument could cause this type of violence?
Well, like the chief said, the inability to handle conflict is a huge problem we have, and what's causing a lot of the violence within the community. Like you spoke earlier, the missing protector factor in the household, and having a man teach a young man how to appropriately handle conflict and how to not escalate something that's menial is definitely huge. The types of conflicts that we see in mediated pathways to peace can be from, we have seen altercations occur and lead to a stabbing from something as simple as a young lady telling another young lady, you think you cute. You know, it doesn't take a whole lot if you don't know how to handle conflict. And then with our young men, when you are adding bravado and with a firearm and things of that nature, and you know the pressures of your peers to have you so-called represent yourself as a man over something minute, it was what drives a lot of the violence that we see. A lot of the violence that we see is not the case of you just trying to protect yourself. It's a case of you trying to boost your reputation on the street. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people that suffer at the hands of that.
Chief Sheppard, listening to the answer that you as well as Mr. Saunders gave, how does community policing play a part into this? How can we begin to develop a stronger relationship? How can we begin to get the good people? One of the things that Dr. King said, that there is nothing more appalling than the noise of bad people, than the appalling silence of good people. How can we get good people to start supporting the efforts of the police department?
I think the key piece to that is for the good people to realize that it's not about the police against them. You know, a lot of people will, when you talk to people about police and police engagement, police relationships, they'll make it sound like the police department's out there trying to make arrests to make the police department look good. The reality is, realize why the police department is doing what they're doing. You know, my gentleman here, he works for the Jefferson Avenue Business Association. From his perspective, he wants us to keep that block clean. And that's why we go clean that block. Well, from somebody else's perspective is, why are you messing with these young men? You know, all they're doing is just chilling. They're not committing a crime. They're just hanging out. But that chilling, hanging out disrupts business, because somebody says, I'm not going to go on Jefferson Avenue because I see all these young men hanging out. So a lot of what the police department does isn't to satisfy the police department. It's really to satisfy the people who live in these neighborhoods. And I think, as you said, people have to be willing to step up and not be silent about what they want in their own neighborhood. Because, you know, the reality is, if the police department pulled away and said, you know what, we won't do anything, that would cause even more problems. So us coming in and trying to do our business, it isn't about us doing it for Chief Sheppard. It's not me doing it for the mayor. It's for the people who live in those neighborhoods. And they really have to stand up and say, this is what we want, this is what we need. In terms of changing how these young men engage each other, the community has to say that too, is that it's unacceptable. You know, a lot of times in my position, I'll hear people say, you know, the police have done this, police do that. Rarely do I hear somebody from the community say that a young man did something that was totally inappropriate, that was, you know, in terms of violence, that was totally unacceptable. The only time you hear it is when it touches them personally.
Mr. Baldwin, when you go over on Park Avenue, Monroe Avenue, Goodman, you see that community over there just thriving, people going up and down the streets there, shopping, the businesses that are there. What can we do, or what basically has to be done for us to get Jefferson Avenue or corridors like that, Jefferson, Genesee, Portland? How do we begin to build those up? I think that the chief really hit on a very good point. It's going to be hard to get people to come into an area if they don't feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. So how are you dealing with this as the president of the Jefferson Avenue Business Association?
Well, right now we're starting with our revitalization program, and it's already begun. Last year we did the groundwork by putting new lighting. We're going to light up the avenue. That would deter crime as well. So we're going to light up the avenue, and then we're going to repave. And we're going to build. We're going to build new businesses. We're going to put it back to where it was originally. We're going to have our businesses downstairs, and we're going to have our residents upstairs, just like the building were before. That way we'll have the businesses included into the residential area, and that would keep the crime away, because the people don't want loiterers around their house, so they won't have that. And then we'll have our police friends to come by and make sure that that they don't do that. But that's the most important part, is to get rebuilt and to make it look like a Park Avenue and look like one of those places where people would want to come. So that's what we're intending to do at this time.
I know I approach this problem from sometimes a very idealistic point of view of what I would like it to be. But realistically, the reality of this, and once again I ask you, Mr. Saunders, because you are really tied into these young people, how do we realistically, if there even is an answer to this, but how do we begin to touch into these young people? How do these young men especially, well, I guess young women too, because the women today
Yes,
are
sir.
just as violent as the young men are.
Right.
So how do we tap into these young people? And the rest of you think about this as well. Not only do we tap into them, how do we encourage them to understand going back to school to get an education? I did a show earlier, and it was a special during December, and it was about the history of Black Rochester from its very beginning. We had three very prominent black men that we talked about. One was Frederick Douglass, one was Austin Stewart, and the other one was Thomas James. And what all three of these men had in common was that they saw education was their ticket to freedom. When Frederick Douglass was still enslaved, the master's wife was teaching Frederick Douglass along with her son how to read and write. And then when her husband came in and saw her teaching Frederick, he shut that down, because he said, the next thing you know, you educate this man and then he'll want to be free. And when Frederick Douglass heard that, he equated education with freedom. Today, we have separated that.
Right.
How do we bring that back? How do we realistically start tapping into these young people?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the young people that we deal with don't look at education as freedom. They look at financial gain as their freedom. It's unfortunate that because of the different failures that some of our participants might have had, some of our citizens might have had in our school system, that they have no faith in their ability to be able to perform within the school construct. That being the case, we end up with a lot more young men and young ladies in the community dropping out. With that, we have to, as a collective effort throughout the community, come together and be able to deliver a message of support and also offer opportunities that will be able to lend vocational and academic support to individuals that otherwise wouldn't be able to learn in a regularly structured classroom. We have to understand that there are different ways that young people learn that might not be the conventional and traditional way. That being the case, we have to come up with alternatives and opportunities available to these young people to offer them the opportunity to still succeed, even though it's not in a traditional school setting. That being said, although those opportunities are being offered, they have to want to come in and perform to be able to achieve whatever they can achieve from gaining those that knowledge that's being offered. As far as being able to get them to understand the value, I think it's gonna, excuse me, it's gonna take a concerted effort across the board throughout the community to be able to, when you can, get a young person's attention, take them by the hand and show them what can occur for you positively through advancing your education, whether through vocational or academic pursuits. Not talking about it to young people is not going to help. Riding past these young people that are hanging out that you might know or might be family members of people you might know is not going to help. Engagement is what's going to have to take place with these young people. We can't be afraid to talk to children. I refuse to be afraid to talk to a child. You know, a lot of times they'll tell you, well, I you know, perpetrated a violent act because I felt disrespected. Well, the way to be able to get respect is to give respect. And when we encounter young people on the streets, we encounter them in a respectful manner, and we will require that of them. If that's not a possibility, then we know to move on rather than to push for a confrontation. But, you know, I honestly believe each and every one of us has the capability to be able to say something positive to one or more of these young people. And as more of us are doing that and drumming that positive message to them, it just may take that one moment of clarity on behalf of that young person to want to do something more positive for themselves and their community.
Chief Sheppard, do you have any programs where the police department perhaps maybe goes to centers or after-school program and talk to young people and show videos? I saw another very damaging graph that Professor Clovis has, and this was a graph of all the, well, not all, but several young men and women that died here uselessly. Do you have meetings and community talks like that with young people where you can talk about things like this?
We have a tremendous number of events or scenarios in which we go out to the community, whether it's to schools, whether it's to rec centers, to engage youth relative to trying to, again, be more role models, try to engage them, try to have those same conversations with them. We go into the schools and do, we're partnered with freereadingpartnerships.com, in which we read to students during the school day. Again, it's all about establishing that relationship. You know, we don't want it to be where a child, you know, the police come to the house, we arrest the father, now the police, I mean, now the kid has an issue with us because we messed with his parents. Then next time they engage us, they're 15, 16 years old, and it's a negative thing, and it continues. We realize that we have to engage them when they're young. We have to realize that it has to be a positive opportunity that we have to take advantage of. And as Victor said, you know, you have to talk to these kids and give them a positive message. You hit a key piece that, you know, a lot of times when I talk to kids, I stress, is that there was a time when to educate a black man was unlawful. Yet today, you have to force kids to go to school. And there's no excuse for that. Right. You know, when we talk about poverty, I think anybody sitting in this room grew up in poverty. You know what I mean? So that's not an excuse to take that path of where you're not going to educate yourself, you're not going to learn to read, you're not going to open up a book. Don't use that as your excuse. Go get that education. It is freedom, and it's free. You know, of all the things in life that's out there, that's the only thing you can say, it's for free. And they open up those buildings and say, come in and get your education. And these young adults need to understand that, you know, whether you get monetary gain, whether you get street respect, that does not transition into being successful in life.
When you started speaking, there was one thing that caught my attention. When you do have to go into a household and arrest that father or whatever that family member, whoever that family member is, how do you deal with that? How can you come back somehow and talk to the rest of the family to get them to understand why this particular, maybe not you yourself, but why this particular situation happened, stressing public safety?
I know a lot of times we do take the opportunity to engage a family or engage a loved one in terms of what occurred and why it occurred. And we do take the opportunity a lot of times, particularly with the young adults. We have another, I would call it a program, Toys on Patrol, where we'll take the opportunity to actually give them stuffed animals. We work with the Pirate Toy Fund to again, you know, yeah, we had to make this arrest. You know, everybody was yelling and screaming, but it's nothing personal against you. And if there's something that we can do to, you know, help you through school or somebody you need to talk to, give us a call. But we do take those opportunities to try to establish a positive interaction, even though it may be initiated by something that was negative. It's always going to be negative. If I come to your house, arrest your mother, arrest your father, arrest your brother, it's not going to be a positive experience. But we also understand that that doesn't translate to everybody in that household is a problem, or everybody in that household is a bad person. And with young kids, we can have such tremendous impact sometimes with just a smile.
Would you like to address that? Have you heard things like that? I've been over to Pathways to Peace, and I've spoken with the young women there as well. as with young men. But would you talk a little bit about what Pathways to Peace is and what you do?
Well, basically, we were started three mayor's administrations ago as a street outreach team that worked in the Crescent specifically, targeting those high-risk individuals that would be a victim or an assailant in a violent crime. With that, we try and address those needs for those young people to avoid them from being put into a situation where they feel they have to be an assailant or a victim in a violent crime. With that, we try and find different alternatives and resources within the community that would be able to allow them to either learn conflict resolution. We've previously received grant funding and sponsored aggression replacement training, as well as programming that we have in collaboration with Youth for Change, which is our Goodfellas program, which you were speaking of, and our Divas program. We definitely have a lot of conversation as it relates to the young people that we serve and how they deal with law enforcement and their perception of law enforcement. We've previously done trainings with Rochester Police Department as it relates to engagement in the community. And basically just letting them know as well that, you know, the perception that is given your uniform was here before you arrived. And you're going to be addressing issues that might not have anything directly related to you as a person, but through your job and the perception of your uniform. A lot of the young people we serve, if they've never had a negative interaction with law enforcement, they have a negative perception only because of different things they might have heard from peers and things of that nature as it relates to law enforcement. Chief Sheppard and other law enforcement officials have been integral in offering the community opportunities to do police and citizen symposiums and things of that nature, to offer our young people an opportunity to ask some of the harder questions, to have officers who are raised in these same neighborhoods, giving them the opportunity to speak to these young people in a positive, safe environment, and be able to have a give and take that would basically allow them a better opportunity of knowing that you're dealing with not just a blue uniform, but you're dealing with a person. As the chief would agree, there are different situations that arise on the street that have a heightened level of interaction, and you know, it's not, that might not be the perfect time to be able to share your differences. But whenever we have an opportunity to do so, I think it's in our best interest as a community to teach our young people that, you know, everyone has a job to do, and we have a responsibility as citizens of the community. That being the case, we know what we want to do to avoid from having a negative police interaction, although we know it's a possibility that could occur at, you know, being in the wrong place, wrong time.
And I would just want to touch on another piece on that in terms of, you know, the perception of the police in the community. Because the negative perception of the police serves somebody's agenda. You know, and when you think about people who are engaged in criminal behavior, it serves their agenda to say, we don't believe in snitching, and you can't talk to the police, and they're out to get you. Because as long as nobody in the neighborhood is talking about who's doing what, they can continue to do what they do. And I think it behooves the Rochester Police Department, the Rochester community, to get past that and realize everything that the Rochester Police Department does is trying to make your neighborhood better. You know, you may not like the fact that I wrote your ticket. I stopped you because your headlight's out. But it's all about trying to make these neighborhoods safer, because those are some of the tactics we use to take these guns off the street or take some of these hoodlums off the street, because they need to be off the street. But the people that have them convinced that if the Rochester Police Department is doing something and you talk to them or you're engaged with them or you're considered a friend of theirs, then you're ostracized from the community. That is totally unacceptable. And the fact of the matter is, when bad things happen in neighborhoods, it happens to the people that live in those neighborhoods. And that's what needs to be addressed. We talk about businesses. And I know from going to community meetings, sitting down with business owners, is that they want things to be different. They want these neighborhoods to be where people say, you know what, I'm going to go on Jefferson Avenue. I hear they got a great barbershop over there. I'm going to go get my hair cut. Or I'm going to go to a nice eatery and have a nice meal. And they also know that for a lot of these neighborhoods, those people won't come because there's people on those streets that intimidate them don't have to be involved in crime. They just intimidate them. And I know as a business owner, I'd want people to be able to come and enjoy what I have to offer and let me profit.
I know this is a pretty tough question that I'm getting ready to ask, and that is, how do we get the scourge of drugs out of our community? I know that has to be a problem that law enforcement deals with. I know that it affects your businesses up on Jefferson Avenue when you drive up there and you see these guys, openly doing their business. It affects the young people drastically. And what is the solution? How do we begin to start focusing in on that?
I'm gonna touch on 2 quick points. One, in terms of what happens in a neighborhood, the community has to decide that they're gonna change. You know, and in my 30 years in the police department, I've seen neighborhoods change. I'll give you an example, the South Wedge. When I came on this job in the early 80s, the South Wedge was just like any other bad neighborhood. You know, you had houses that were boarded up, you had a lot of crime problems, you had a lot of drug dealing on the corners, and the community itself decided to change it, and we helped them, but they didn't put it on our lap. And I think a lot of times in neighborhoods, somebody wants somebody to do something, but they ain't gonna do it. And that's what has to change. It's not say, City Hall, come fix this problem, or Rochester Police Department, come fix this problem, but say, City Hall, come help us. Rochester Police Department, come help us. That's how you can make it happen.
Well, being one that lives in the Crescent as well, and I've lived on my street for over 30 years, I think that I'm still lucky enough that my street, I still consider a neighborhood, and we have families that live on our street. We haven't had that as an issue on our street. When it has seemed to have become a problem, it wasn't a thing for you to go knock on the door, talk to someone, and let them know that this is something that is unacceptable on this street, and it's nothing that we're going to put up with. Granted, there are individuals who are violent, there are individuals who try and intimidate individuals into allowing that to occur. But people don't have to be alone in dealing with that. And I think that is a major component of it. I think that as a community, don't think that you're going to be held hostage in your own home. You know, I hate to see that being looked at as the only viable opportunity for our young people to succeed is to get some dope and go out on a corner. I refuse to believe that. And unfortunately, through media and through other things, what they see is if I can succeed at that, I can have all those materialistic things and things of that nature that is supposed to be the staple of a successful life, that they don't attach to education.
Mr. Baldwin, once again, because of the quarter that you're on and you're right up there, and I grew up on Jefferson Avenue. I mean, this is the worst I've ever seen it. I was a troubled kid. I got myself into a lot of trouble. Through a unique set of circumstances, I was forced to leave out of here. And I was gone for a good period of time, but I ended up changing my life. I've turned my life around. And now, because I'm a business owner as well, coming up to establish a business on Jefferson Avenue, I tell you the truth, I would be very hard-pressed to do that. As president of the Business Association, if you were to encourage me to come set up my office there, it would have to take some real talking to. I'm assuming that you're perhaps maybe going out trying to attract businesses into the community. What is your approach to them trying to get business to come in? Because I believe when we can get more positive businesses to come in, then you have a stronger sense of community. Perhaps maybe this is another way of forcing some of the negative aspects of that community out?
Well, we do encourage businesses to come down to Jefferson Avenue, and we encourage them by telling them about our revitalization. And our revitalization come all the way from New York City, you know. Louise Slaughter started this out as a momentum to Mr. Lightfoot, and but it's well needed long before that. But nobody really stepped up to the plate to get it going. The business was just dying out, and houses were deteriorating, and there were more drugs, and they were tearing them up. And I remember when Jefferson Avenue was very viable. They had hat shops and eateries and shoe stores and laundromats and grocery stores and everything else over there. And we're going to bring it back to that. We had this program going, and we had the community involved. We met at the church. We let the community on the streets beside Jefferson. We had those come down to interact along with our police department for the safety programs, and that's where we get our revitalization start from. And that's why we wanted lit up. Everybody was in agree about the lighting and people sneaking up behind them, you know, and we didn't want that. So that's going to be our first start. We're going to put our lighting up, and RG&E was very valuable on that part by coming and putting a different size lighting in there. We're going to have some like 14-foot light, and then we're going to have the one on the street corners, and it's going to be well lit up. It's like Park Avenue. And then we're going to do it, this is what we have to tell our people coming in, so they won't have to be worried about the situation. And we're gonna do our new buildings, and our new buildings is gonna have our grocery stores in there. It's gonna have our little, we're supposed to have a little plaza in there from Columbia to Harley Street there, and all these supposed to start taking place next year. Okay. And once people see, because that was the thing, people never saw anything happen. So when we start a project and it takes so long by going through the paperwork through the city, people got discouraged, you know, and they dropped the ball, and it never got done. So this time we're gonna hold on, and the Jefferson Avenue Business Association is gonna be behind it all the way, and we're gonna see this through, that we're gonna get this new lighting, and we're gonna get these new buildings on the avenue, and we're gonna get new people, new businesses coming out. I think RIT, or University of Rochester, is gonna have businesses coming down, laundromats and things for the students down there, since we have all of the new students building right there on Plymouth and Jefferson. So we're gonna have places for those to go, you know, sandwich shops and things. All of that is coming on the avenue. Okay. And it's gonna be revitalized, and it's gonna start in 2012.
Very good. I also think a very valuable piece to this is that we need more role models. We need greater examples. As I said, I grew up being very, very bad. I say jokingly that I was a very bad boy, but I'm a very good man now. And I wrote a book, and the name of my book is called I Wanted to Be Bad. Mm-hmm. And in my book, I'm telling young people, there's no prize behind that door. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's nothing to be accomplished, and if nothing else, learn from my experience, the hard road that I took to only find myself to have to come back to this particular path. I know there have to be more role models out here. How do we get these people to start engaging and becoming a part of this solution?
Excuse me. Well, when you talk role models, I think back to a program we've been working on with the University of Rochester and Finger Lakes Mental Health. And basically it's the natural helpers, which the role models are the people in those neighborhoods. The role models are the individuals that came up here picking beans from Florida just to get up here to be able to get a job at Kodak and Xerox and raise a family, and now have grandchildren and great-grandchildren that have graduated from college. These are role models. The role models that I see are the business owners, Mr. Baldwin, people like that, or Willie Lightfoot Jr., you know, individuals like that. We have numerous role models. It's just that we aren't wearing professional uniforms, should I say, sports uniforms and things of that nature, because yes, we're wearing professional uniforms. And we have some phenomenal role models. But like I say, a lot of them, we aren't flashy. We do what we're supposed to do. We follow the rules of society. We pay our bills. And, you know, that's what the role model is. And, you know, and that's what needs to be pushed as, this is what a role model is. It's not anything that's superhero-like. You know, we are people who have had a lot of the similar situations that a lot of these young people have had, but we work beyond our circumstance, and that's what it comes down to. Just like you said, yeah, you were a bad boy, but you're a good man. And by the same token, I tell people and the young people that I have to speak with, listen, who you see before you is not who I was 20 years ago. You got to understand who you are now does not necessarily dictate who you are going to be as an adult. But it depends on what you plan on putting into yourself in order to make those changes. And a lot of our best role models are individuals that have had to live through hardships and make those changes so you have a full respect for yourself and your community. And that's what I push with a lot of the young people that we serve, and the young men and young women. You know, the people they see every day that are going to ask them, how you doing today, and really mean it. That's a role model. That individual you can rely on, you know, for any small thing, just a nice word. That's your role model. And we role models that are not those superheroes just got to play our role, do what we need to do, be respectful of the young people we come in contact with, and engage them in conversation. And engaging them in conversation when it's something pertinent that they need information about, they'll ask.
I'd like to ask you, Chief, I know that perhaps in your early days of being on the police force, coming through them, sometimes this wasn't, I'm assuming that there were times that this wasn't the most pleasant place to be on either side of the equation, but yet you stuck in there, you hung in there, you faced adversity, and now you are our chief of police for the city of Rochester. I know that within side of your life experience that there's a wealth of information there. Would you just share a little bit of that with our listening and viewing audience?
Well, first off, I'd like to say that, you know, I've been in policing for 30 years now, and it's a great honor to serve as the chief of the Rochester Police Department. And I don't say that from the perspective that, you know, as you mentioned earlier, that it's all about law enforcement. I think over my career, my maturity has led me to know that it's really about serving people. This is a people job, and it's about serving people and recognizing that, again, the majority of the people, not just the majority, but the vast majority of the people in the city are good people. And what they want to be is safe in their homes. They want to be able to go to work and not worry about somebody breaking in their house. They don't want to have to worry about their babies getting hurt. The one thing that I've always strived for myself and for my children is you can't always look at the negative. You have to hear the positive. You know, and I think one of the things that we fail, the children of Rochester, is that we rarely talk about the positive ones. We never talk about the kids that's doing the right things. We never talk about the kid who's getting his education or ended up going to Harvard. We always focus on the negative. And we talk about the kids that's gangbanging. We talk about the kids who's hanging on them corners. And what you find is that we all want attention. But if the only way I can get attention is to do something negative, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what we see, is that a lot of these kids want to be noticed, they want to be recognized, and the only time we recognize a kid is when he shoots somebody. Then we're going to talk about him, put his picture on the paper, put him on the news. But we don't go out and say, look at Missy Johnson, who is an A student, and she's doing this with her life, and when she gets done with high school, she's going to be going to the University of Rochester. Those kids travel through this world unnoticed, and that's wrong. Also, the language that we talk. And you said something earlier where you said, you know, this is the worst you've ever seen it. And again, in my experience, what people fail to see is this city has changed a lot to the positive. You know what I mean? In my 30 years of policing, and you know, Victor can relate to it, there was a time when this city had, you know, 70 homicides in it. Right. You know, now, you know, we had 31 last year, and that's too many. It's one, you know, one is too many, but people don't see that. Or when we had, you know, 29,000 major crimes in the city. You know, this year we're probably around 13,000. People don't see that, and they don't hear that. So it's always a constant negative, negative, negative. And I think these kids hear negative, and so they think, hey, ain't no sense in me trying. And when I talk about violence, you know, when we talk about how violent these streets are, sometimes you make a young man go get a gun. You know, if you're going to say that the streets are so bad that you need a weapon, that's what they feel like is, hey, on the news, that's all they talk about, I better protect myself. And they go get one. And once you got one, it's that close to using it. And then you started down that downward trend.
That's right.
That's right. I do believe that.
Well, that's a very good point that you're mentioning. So how do we get that word out? How do we get this community to see that there is more of an upside than a downside? How do we get that information out here to people so they can see the positive things that are doing? But before you answer that, just think about that. I would like for you to talk about you personally coming up through the ranks in the police department, because I know that had to be a very difficult thing for from starting 30 years ago. I believe that 30 years ago, the mindset of a black person being the chief of police wasn't even a consideration. Okay? But yet, you hung in there despite all the adversity. And I think that if we can get young people to see what it took for you to get to where you got, maybe this will encourage another person to, maybe if nothing else, just finish high school.
Well, one thing that, you know, and I don't recall this, but I know when I entered the police academy in January 1981, one of the things that we had to do was stand up and talk about what was our vision, who we were, and what was our goal in being in the police department. Now, since I've become chief, some of my peers who came through the academy with me said that I stood up and said, my name is James Sheppard, and I want to be the chief of police. And the reason you know, it makes me laugh that I would step out on that plank, so to speak, to say that that was my goal. But I truly believe that for anybody who strives to be anything, you first have to tell yourself you can do it, or you have to believe in yourself that that can actually happen. You know, if you talk negative to yourself, then that's really what's going to happen. I was raised by a father that was in the Marines. We were raised as little Marines. And by being a little Marine, that meant you didn't whine, you didn't cry, you didn't blame circumstances on somebody else. You knuckled down and you dealt with what you had to deal with, and you move ahead. And so that's how I've always looked at this job, is that I had faith in me. I had faith in the values that I brought to this job. I didn't feel that I had to go along. If somebody, you know, in policing, you know, some people may not walk the straight line. But I didn't feel I had to go there and violate my own personal character, my own values. And so I felt very strong about who I was and what I wanted to be and what I thought this job represented. Now, I never, in my wildest dreams, thought that, yep, for sure, you're going to be the chief of police. But I always felt that I had to live up to my parents. You know, I was raised in the world of saying, when you lead a house, you represent the Sheppards.
That's right.
And that's how I conducted myself, knowing that I did not want to embarrass my family. I didn't want to embarrass my father. I just wanted to make them proud of me, and so that's how I proceeded through life. I also think it was key that education. You know, as I looked around me and I saw people advance through the police department, that one thing that was consistent was that those were the people who, in addition to going to high school, and they went to college. Even if it was while they were in the police department, they let the city of Rochester pay for their education. Those are the key things that you have to do. But I'm very proud of the fact that I have the privilege of serving the citizens of Rochester as a chief. I think that in terms of my vision, it's what you've talked about all along, is where they don't look at the police department as the enemy or some occupying force, but they look at us as their partner in making this city safe and making it where people want to live in it.
Mr. Baldwin, I think in this day and time, so many young people truly do not understand about entrepreneurship, developing businesses for themselves, for their families. I think the spirit of entrepreneurship has gotten away from us. I think that we're thinking that somehow that there's going to be another Kodak coming in here providing 60,000 jobs. Mm-hmm. How do we encourage young people to see becoming business owners, how this is a very vital part of a community?
Well, actually, we have to try to change minds because they have a mindset on, just like Chief was saying and Brother Victor over there, that money, get money now and do what you need to do now. And that's not the way life is. Mm-hmm. You have to crawl before you can walk. Mm-hmm. And it's biblical to start, well, this country was built on the love of God. You see, and God we trust is on the money. So we trusted God, and that's where we should start. We should get people from most of the churches around here and get these people that believe and have a ground rule with a religious background, that they should start from there and have these people as mentors, and we should solicit these churches to get most of these men that with this Christian background, and we should try to put a little basic back into the community. In that case, we're supposed to build this program, this building down there, re-entry building, that people, the young guys that get out of jail for the first or second time or something, and to reacclimate them. And we should have some mentors in this same building that would get attached to these young men, and they kind of see how they live and how they got to where they are by these men mentoring these young boys and taking them through their life cycle to let them know that it takes time. You don't get everything by just robbing a bank and getting rich. You know, it takes time and it takes sacrifice. And that's how you get to be a business owner, because normally when you go into business from the beginning, there's always a risk. And if you don't take care of business the way it's supposed to be, or you miss some items, that you have to sacrifice, and in order for your business to continue. And in order to sacrifice, you have to do without. A lot of people don't want to do that. So that's why a lot of people get discouraged from that. And their mindset is not strong enough. So with these mentors, I was thinking that would be a good part that they can start with, and that would probably go off pretty good over the community, because we have a lot of churches in Rochester.
Okay. I think, too, another part of developing entrepreneurship is that we have to get people to understand that there are three major components. Mm-hmm. First thing about entrepreneurship is the autonomy that this gives you. Yes. There is freedom in being able to create your own. Mm-hmm. The second component is complexity. The complexity of being able to do something that perhaps no one else has done, exactly, or finding a way to do it better than anyone else has been able to do it. And the third component is to be able to see the connection between effort and reward. Yes. And when we can do that, then exactly, that's what is part of that entrepreneurial spirit. Mm-hmm. And that brings me back to speaking with you now, Mr. Saunders. How can we begin to now enrich our young people to start looking at that they're more than capable of becoming business owners, becoming successful people, being the person that I believe that they were meant to be? How can we begin to take this message and enrich their lives?
Honestly, I believe being able to show them alternative entrepreneurial opportunities is definitely a key. You know, in this hip-hop society that we live in, there are numerous different ways to make legal money. You just have to know what those different ways are. I think there's individuals who are doing graphic art, doing different things, designing covers for CDs, you name it. There's numerous different ways, alternative ways to make money legally. And individuals that are doing it need to share of that, the skill base that it takes to do it. There's a kid right now home from school doodling on a piece of paper that's talented, but he doesn't know where to take his art. He doesn't want to just paint paintings. He needs to know there's other ways to be able to use that art to possibly get him paid. There's an individual right now listening to his friend's rap tape, and he knows what's not sounding good, but not being able to put it in the right context, he can't really tell him what it is needs to be changed, but a producer can. And that's this is the different types of things that our kids might come across but don't know how to ask, what do I need to do in order to get better at this so I can possibly use this as a springboard for my success. I think that is huge. A lot of, we were coming up, the basics. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a police officer. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be an athlete. Well, that's changed. And with that change, we have to change. And we have to offer those opportunities to these young people and at least get them to ask the question, more so than anything else. Get them to ask the question, or we ask the question of them, what skill do you have? What strength do you have that we can build on? We all see the negatives. We see you hanging out every day. We see all those different things. So what are we not seeing of you that makes you special that we can build on? With what we do and the work with the young people that we serve, we want to be strength-based. We want to build on something that you either care for or something that you might be good at that could allow you the opportunity to feel proud about your performance, feel proud about what you can do for yourself, to not only make yourself proud, but to make your parent proud.
As I said, unfortunately, we only have an hour. And within an hour, there's no way that we can resolve all of these issues. But I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this dialogue. I'm hoping that we can do this again, because I believe this is part of the pathway to peace, is by developing this dialogue, us sitting down, looking at the issues, and trying to provide solutions to those issues. In closing, Chief Sheppard, what would you like to share with our viewing audience?
First off, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me for this opportunity to speak about the issues that we're talking about. As a chief, very rarely do you get that opportunity to talk about things that are more than just law enforcement. And I think that the Rochester community needs to hear that the chief of police, the Rochester Police Department cares, and that our purpose is to serve them, to make these cities safe. Thank you so much. Mr. Baldwin.
I'd like to thank you for having me on the show. That way we can get more businesses on Jefferson Avenue with that outbreak. Let them know that we will be better and we will be back.
Very good. Mr. Saunders.
I'd like to echo these gentlemen and thank you for the opportunity to come on. And for any of the young people that are watching, understand that you are looking at role models presently. We do not wear capes. We are not superheroes. We are individuals that are regular citizens, but we care about what happens to you, and we need you to care about yourselves.
I'd like to say that you're ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for coming on, and I appreciate the time that you spent with me.
Thank you.
We spend so much time of our lives walking from room to room, making a list of all the work that needs to be done, all the cracks that need to be patched, when we should be walking through the rooms of our lives, not looking at the flaws, but at the potential. Because 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do compared to the things that you did do. So let go, stop playing safe, dare to explore, dare to dream, dare to discover. Now, I got some bad news and some good news. The bad news, time flies. The good news, you're the pilot. I wish everyone a happy and prosperous new year, and always remember, it's a new day, and I'm feeling good, and this is James Young. I'll see you next week. Be blessed.